China's highest-ranking military officer, a close ally of leader Xi Jinping, is now under investigation for corruption. China's military and political establishment are worried.
I think this is definitely causing quite a lot of fear.
I'm Marco Werman. The ongoing purge inside China's military. And nearly 2.5 years after the attack of October 7th, the remains of the last Israeli hostage have just been recovered from Gaza.
I think the first thing we're going to see is a kind of national exhalation.
Also today, in the Outer Hebrides off the coast of Scotland, keeping the Sabbath holy is an old tradition, but times are changing, and that's hard for some locals.
I would never even think about opening on Sunday. For me, again, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but at least that's one day I can spend with my family.
That's all ahead today here on The World. This is The World. I'm Marco Werman. Carolyn Baylor is off today. We begin this Monday in China, where a widening purge of the Chinese military is reshaping the military senior command. This weekend, the country's defense ministry said the highest-ranking general in the People's Liberation Army was under investigation for, quote, grave violations of discipline and the law. The 75-year-old general, Zhang Youxia, is a combat veteran and was seen as a close ally of Chinese leader Xi Jinping. According to the Wall Street Journal, he's being accused of leaking nuclear secrets to the United States. Shanshan Mei studies China's armed forces at the research organization RAND. I started by asking her about the implications for the Chinese military.
To me, this almost feels like a emperor has no clothes moment for the PLA.
PLA being the People's Liberation Army.
Indeed, because as we've been looking and reading about the PLA, we think a lot of emphasis, media attention has been poured onto the drastic modernization that China has achieved. In fact, even as recent as September, they just put on another big show of a big military so-called Victory Day, parading all the most advanced, sophisticated, modern equipment. But the reason why I say it's an emperor's no clothes moment is that the accusations that have been placed on two top generals over the weekend have really revealed that in terms of military personnel and military leadership, there were huge problems, huge holes exist, but have not attracted enough attention. So this is big.
And what about these charges reported by the Wall Street Journal that General Zhang was working for the CIA and leaking nuclear secrets? Do those allegations have any credibility?
From my personal perspective, I have quite some doubts about allegations like that. We never know. Chinese politics is notoriously a black box. And the second point I really want to make is I doubt this, mainly because General Zhang Youxia is 75 years old. I think he has, 60 plus years of his life were spent within the PLA. Someone at that level and that kind of experience, life experience, dedicated to the PLA, it just doesn't make sense to me that he would be someone to sell out state secrets or military secrets whatsoever in exchange for money and gains.
Tell us more about Zhang Youxia, the top general dismissed this weekend. Who is he?
He is currently China's top uniformed military leader, sort of equivalent to the U.S. chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff. General Zhang Youxia is a career army military officer from a very prestigious Chinese Communist Party revolutionary family. His father, Zhang Zongxun, served alongside the Revolutionary Communist Party in China's wars to fight for independence, China's independence. And Zhang was born to a general. So he's known as, in Chinese parlance, a so-called princeling, went to elite Chinese schools, but also sort of carrying on a family tradition.
Shanshan, if you have doubts about these nuclear secrets charges, why, in your opinion, do you think Xi set Zhang Youxia aside?
I do think he is a true believer in the sense that he believes in the importance and trying to rejuvenate Chinese nation, but also to accelerate the modernization process of the military. It feels very personal when Xi Jinping put charges like that sources coming out of China, they're saying possibly he was accused of selling out. Now, this kind of labeling, well, first of all, it sounds very, very Chinese in the sense that the Chinese Communist Party, when dealing with internal issues or problems, the number one tactic they often have is to blame outsiders, blame mostly Americans for having a hand trend in causing all sorts of disturbances within Chinese politics. But in this case, specific case, it really is very personal in the sense that almost like Xi Jinping is trying to humiliate Zhang Youxia using really outlandish and crazy accusations such as selling out nuclear weapons secrets or things like that.
Well, none other than former Australian Prime Minister Kevin Rudd, a China expert, believes that Chinese government officials who've been purged under Xi Jinping number in the hundreds of thousands. We don't know what that number really is, but do we know how other members of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, feel about these purges?
I think this is definitely causing quite a lot of fear. Actually, not to say, I think since she came to power and over the past 10 years or so, fear has probably become a way of life within the party members. But what happened this weekend, I think, will even increase more fear and more risk averse of the party members, but also the government officials, not just within the military, but also across the entire Chinese government. I think people will be very concerned right now about, who's next, because anyone could be next. A biggest thing I think related to this is really within the PLA, given Zhang Youxia's stature within the PLA and the deep networks he had built up all these years through decades of service, there will be a lot of panicking. I can see that when people now, trying to figure out how am I going to preserve myself. And so morale, I think, is also taking a big toll.
I'm speaking with Shanshan Mei with RAND about this weekend's purge of China's top general in the People's Liberation Army. If you look at China's military organogram, these purges have basically hollowed out military leadership, leaving Xi Jinping at the top with a very distant subordinate. Where does this leave Xi Jinping? How unstable are things for him right now?
I honestly am very concerned about the lack of true military operational expertise at the very top. The vice chair currently is the only one that's left on the Central Military Commission, is a career political officer. He lacks military operational experiences to advise Xi. This is really why I'm very concerned, because who's going to advise Xi Jinping? Let's make it wild. And when she wants to use nuclear weapons, he needs expert advice and really people he trusts and who knows the stuff to advise him. So it's unclear who is assuming that role right now from the military side.
The rumor mill, you probably know, has been rife in the past 24 hours with wild narratives about what happened. Descriptions of a plot to take out Xi, an insider betraying the operation just before it happened. I don't know what details you've been able to verify, Shanshan, but generally, how do you figure out what to believe given the impermeability of the so-called Great Chinese Firewall and censorship?
I have become, over the years, a big fan of Chinese propaganda. Because I do think sometimes what the propaganda reviews, if you know that's propaganda, then if you reverse engineer it, it actually provides quite a lot of insights. But it does take us as outside researchers and observers to very carefully monitor Chinese publicly available and especially all these government official sources that the different kind of statements, different kind of speeches or propaganda materials such as, the PLA Daily, which is the top newspaper, a mouthpiece of the propaganda department of the PLA.
Well, of course, in the background, Shanshan, is the question of Taiwan. How could this dismantling and reshaping of China's military command impact Taiwan and Beijing's designs to get it back under its influence?
I think this is really the million-dollar question that everyone probably want to know for sure. First point I want to make is that the unification of Taiwan, this is sort of the foundational mission that the People's Liberation Army was built out to do. Because in Chinese eyes, the Taiwan issue or Taiwan question is an unfinished civil war that is something the military is built out to do.
Right.
So that is not changing just because of the the huge change that now we're seeing of the high military command. My second point is that, but in terms of operational experience and campaign design and all sorts of execution of such a plan, if they decide to use military force, I do see in the short term this is taking on a very significant blow. Because of morale, because of lack of expertise at the very top. It's going to take Xi Jinping quite some time to replace these holes that he left open now.
Finally, Shanshan, what do you think is going to happen to General Zhang Yusha or his family and friends?
This is very murky. My honest answer is I don't know, because oftentimes, again, the Chinese Communist Party operate with huge opacity, and we don't know.
Shanshan Mei is an expert on China's military at the nonprofit research organization RAND. Finding balance in life can be a constant struggle. In Sweden, people rely on a concept that's been around since the days of the Vikings. It's called lagom, and it's about doing everything in moderation. Reporter Bianca Hillier shared this story with the world last winter.
When Mikael Klintman was a young kid growing up in southern Sweden, he remembers telling his grandma the common refrain, "I'm hungry." In turn, she taught him a lesson and said, imagine traveling back in time 1,000 years ago.
She said, you're at a Viking feast with food and beer and a platter of fish and porridge. So you ask, okay, how much can I take? And the answer you will get from your neighbor is, you should take lagom.
Lagom. It's a very Swedish concept that Klintman came to know as taking only your fair share, so there's enough left for everyone. It's a group-oriented mindset.
It comes from lag, which means team, and lagom means around.
Centuries later, practicing lagom remains central to Swedish culture, and it can mean a bunch of different things. For example,
we tell our teenagers, boys who have started to work out, well, do it lagom, don't overdo it, and so on.
The idea is also embraced in conversations.
You talk for a while, but then you make sure to listen and make sure to even it out.
In other words, say just enough and don't take up too much airspace. That's true in the Swedish business world, too, says Christina Rundkrantz. She's a consultant who helps people from different cultures work together.
Swedes have a very special business culture. It's focused on equality, it's the team.
From interns to CEOs, she says decisions are made through consensus so that nobody dominates the discussion. That example of lagom, she admits, can take a while.
It's good for certain products, I'd say, but in many ways, when the world is moving fast and we want an agile business culture, it could definitely be perceived as slow. Yes, you see it daily in Sweden, daily.
Nikki Brantmark noticed that when she moved from London to Sweden over 20 years ago.
It's a much calmer, slower pace of life.
Brantmark found the lagom way to be a breath of fresh air. Her corporate job actively encouraged a work-life balance, and she says lagom even came in handy during the COVID-19 pandemic.
People are very respectful of each other's space, personal space.
Making social distancing a non-issue. If it all sounds too good to be true, well, sometimes it can be.
Today, we have a widened wealth gap.
Mikael Klintman again.
Which makes the sense that we are one community a bit fragmented into smaller groups.
Klintman now studies the concept of lagom. He's a professor of sociology at Lund University. He says rapid immigration has also put a strain on some elements of lagom. And then there are the instances when people just take lagom too far.
When it becomes performative, then we easily get annoyed.
Years ago, he worked at the Swedish behemoth IKEA and once saw Ingvar Kamprad, the company's founder, crawling inside a delivery truck to make sure everything was packaged properly.
Multi-billionaire, of course, had come there randomly, and he always flew second class and so on. And that annoyed some people, actually, because you shouldn't pretend you're middle class or working class.
Klintman explains that being perfect at being lagom kind of defeats the purpose, because everything, including lagom itself, should be done in moderation. For The World, I'm Bianca Hillier.
You're listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Marco Werman. The islands of the Outer Hebrides off the northwest coast of Scotland are remote, beautiful, and awe-inspiring. They are the UK's last bastion of old-fashioned Christian Sunday observance, with strictures against working, shopping, and even leisure activities on the Sabbath. But things are starting to shift. Richard Baines is a reporter with Inside Europe, a program from our partners at DW. He sent us this report on the changes from Stornoway on the Isle of Lewis and Harris.
I'm in a supermarket on a Sunday morning, something I wouldn't have been able to do in Stornoway until November last year. That was when the local Tesco store, the biggest shop on Lewis, opened on a Sunday for the first time. Unlike the rest of the UK, which abandoned Sunday shutdowns decades ago, the tradition is still largely adhered to in the Western Isles. Churches like this one, the Free Presbyterian, are the reason. At this church, the hour-and-a-half-long service consists of psalm singing, readings, prayers, and a lengthy, passionate, gospel-based sermon from church elder Callum Finlayson.
We adhere to the 10 commandments, and one of these commandments is remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And all the denominations on these islands used to adhere strongly to the keeping of the Sabbath. You wouldn't have families hanging out the washing or going to the beach on the Sabbath here until very recently. You certainly wouldn't have had any shops open or hotels or pubs or the likes. And it isn't a fundamentalist control thing. I say you shouldn't break the Sabbath. You're not allowed to go out of your house and you're only allowed to go to church. It's about caring for people's souls.
Callum takes a dim view of much of the modern world.
Is rock music going to help you find Christ? I don't think so. It's not healthy. And rock music, historically, it has not been a great friend of Christianity. And it hasn't brought anybody to Christ, or it certainly hasn't brought very many people to Christ.
But he's seen his own regular congregation shrink to just 7 people, less than a quarter of what it was 30 years ago. Almost everyone at this service is aged over 70.
Do you think that your church will change with the times in order to maybe just keep its numbers alive?
I don't think so. I mean, there was a movement within our church courts to modernise, as people said, to be more progressive, as people put it. But for our denomination to start bringing in things that make the church more relevant, we will lose the reverence that is an essential part of our worship.
There are around 15 churches in this small town, largely a result of the continued splintering of the National Presbyterian Church of Scotland and its descendants.
This is the side door of the church. We're just going to head into the sanctuary.
Another of those splinters is the Free Church of Scotland in Stornoway. Here there's an outreach officer, Marianne Campbell.
Come in here, it's nice and quiet in here.
Marianne organises open days at the church for tourists who pour off cruise ships into the town, and she finds other ways to engage with would-be worshippers.
Social media for the church is a useful tool. I think it's useful communication. People are on Facebook, they're on Instagram, and so we can use that to spread the good news.
Her church sees hundreds of worshippers on a Sunday, and she hopes that will continue with a growth in numbers at Bible classes for teenagers.
The world on your phone is huge. It's a big social experiment on this generation. They've been called the anxious generation, and it's just so directly linked to having a device that is designed for addiction. All these algorithms, it's all feeding the worst fears of teenage girls or the worst habits of teenage boys. We want them to be thinking and not passive consumers. They're looking for reality. They're looking for something to hold on to that's not shifting. And the Bible offers that
Pakistani Muslims first came to the Western Isles in the 1950s as travelling salesmen. This unassuming single-storey building became the island's first mosque 7 years ago.
To my knowledge, there's never been any conflict between the Muslim community or the local community.
Shopkeeper Abdul Ghaffar is a trustee of the mosque.
They were running on a parallel routes without actually conflicting with each other. The general Muslim community tend to be very traditional. And the local community is actually very traditional and religion bound, and so was ours. So neither side actually conflicted with the other.
Now there are Muslims here from Syria, Iraq and Bangladesh, a total of around 60 people. While they stick to their own traditions, there's one practice Muslims have adopted from the wider community.
I would never even think about opening on Sunday. For me, again, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but at least that's one day I can spend with my family, with my friend, visit and so on kind of thing. I would never give that up for anything.
Your attention is drawn to the passenger emergency instruction notices, which are displayed at the muster stations.
But changes here seem inevitable. For instance, I'm sailing out of Stornoway on a Sunday afternoon. Sunday ferries were only introduced here in 2009. On my journey home, I reflect on Marianne Campbell's success in reaching young people, and Abdul Ghaffar's take on the reason many religious groups worldwide, including, he says, Islam, are dwindling.
The faith is losing the children rather than the children losing faith, because it's not being portrayed the way it should be.
Richard Baines on the ferry home from Scotland's Outer Hebrides.
Richard's story comes to us from our partners at the DW program Inside Europe. You can find more of their work wherever you get podcasts. It is a sad day for panda diplomacy. China has sent the giant bamboo-eating bears around the world as a gesture of goodwill since 1949. Japan has been among the beneficiaries of this policy. The first pandas from China arrived in Japan in 1972, signaling warmer relations between the neighbors. But there are only 2 pandas left in Japan, twin cubs Xiao Xiao and Lele, and they will be returning to China tomorrow. People flock to a zoo in Tokyo by the thousands to see the furry ambassadors one last time. That is despite a 1-minute viewing time set by the zoo to keep those lines a-moving. Chances of Japan getting replacement pandas from China right now, though, are not good. Relations between the two countries have bottomed out. In November, Japan's prime minister said that if China were to invade Taiwan, Japan might intervene. China warned that Japan would suffer a crushing defeat in any such scenario, not the kind of back and forth that suggests another panda exchange anytime soon. You're listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Marco Werman. The Israeli military announced today that the remains of the last hostage held in the Gaza Strip have now been recovered. Ron Gavili was a 24-year-old police officer when he was killed in the Hamas attack on October 7th, more than 2 years ago. His remains were found in a graveyard in an area of Gaza occupied by the Israeli army. The return of Gavili's body means that the U.S. brokered ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas can now move on to phase 2. What happens next, though, is uncertain. To better understand this, we turn to Israeli reporter Noga Tarnopolsky. She spoke with me earlier today from Jerusalem.
In a way, it's a story that represents so much of what Israelis have been through in the last almost 2.5 years now, since October 7th, 2023. Ran Gvili was a police officer, as you said, but when the attack occurred, he was at home on leave because he had broken his shoulder in a motorcycle accident. And so he volunteered. He got up, got in uniform, in the same uniform in which he was found today, and just decided to fight. And he was killed in the fighting that day, though his family didn't know if he was alive or dead for quite a bit of time. And then it took a long time within this 2-point-something year period to figure out exactly where he'd been buried. And Israel actually, despite the massive intelligence failures of October 7th, has shown itself to be quite adept at gathering intel inside Gaza and discovering with great precision the locations of different hostages, alive and dead. But Ran Gwili's case, it's not unique, but it really does stand out because we now know, as of basically yesterday, we know for sure that Israel had the intelligence, had the ability to locate him more than a month ago, from what I have been able to patch together. And for reasons unrelated to bringing him home, unrelated to bringing him back for burial, which is something his family desperately sought, the executive branch in Israel, which is the prime minister's office, were pushing off this moment of inflection for many domestic political reasons.
So given all that, that's kind of confusing. Why would Netanyahu's office want to delay the moment?
I say the government pushed this decision off, pushed giving the order off, but it really was Prime Minister Netanyahu specifically. The Israeli government has become a one-man show. And for Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is a complex moment. On the one hand, he really took a victory lap today. And he told everybody in the Knesset, in the Israeli parliament, I promised I'd bring everyone home, and I brought everyone home. This is the last one. And he then ceremoniously took off the yellow ribbon pin that has come to represent the fate of the hostages. But on the other hand, this now forces Netanyahu to make decisions, follow-up decisions that involve going through with what he promised for the Trump ceasefire plan. Remember, Israel is still in a state of emergency. Israel's still officially in a state of war, despite all the announcements from the White House that the Gaza war is over, that Donald Trump concluded the war. In Israel, the war has never been declared over, and this grants Netanyahu quite a wide berth because he remains an emergency, a prime minister, who has extraordinary powers because it's a state of emergency. We have entered, which is supposed to be an electoral year in Israel, and there are many pressures, contradictory pressures on Netanyahu. For example, the Trump ceasefire deal stipulates that Israel will have to redeploy its forces to the outside perimeter of Gaza, that Egypt and the Palestinian Authority will take over the Rafah border crossing. It also has, Donald Trump has included Qatar and Turkey, among other countries, in his board of peace. All of these things, the involvement of the Turks, of the Palestinian Authority, opening that border, all of these are things that Prime Minister Netanyahu has loudly and repeatedly promised Israelis would never happen, never under his watch. So he's going to have to do a lot of explaining, or he's going to have to find a way to tell the White House, yes, I'm following through, but in reality not follow through. And this is going to make his life very difficult inside Israel.
We'll get to that in a moment, Noga. More than 250 Israelis and foreigners were taken hostage on October 7, 2023. Ran Guan was the last remaining person on that list. What does it mean for Israelis to hear that his body is being returned?
It's the first time since 2014 that there hasn't been an Israeli hostage held in Gaza. We've all forgotten that Hamas had a habit of taking hostages. And one of the lessons that Hamas has taken forth from this war is that the only way it will get its members released from Israeli prisons is by taking Israeli hostages. That is one of the major political knots that Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to have to contend with following the release of Ran Guan. I think the first thing we're going to see is a kind of national exhalation. I expect that his funeral on Wednesday will be one of the most massive events we've seen in this country because the fate of the hostages really became a metaphor for the fate of Israelis, millions of whom have felt that they have been taken hostage by this situation. But it will force Netanyahu to have to contend with possible elections later this year, with the much more overt now demands of the Trump administration. I think with antsy ministers who are looking to see how they can stand out and prove that they're even more right-wing than the prime minister, and a civilian population that has just been gaslit. The most heartbreaking thing that I heard today, that I saw today, was an interview with Rabbi Elchanan Danino. His son, Ori, was one of the 6 Israelis executed by Hamas in August of 2024 after Israel walked away from a ceasefire deal that offered Israel significantly better conditions than the one imposed on it by Trump and went back to war. And he really has become, I think, the face of suffering for thousands and thousands of Israelis. He's a right-wing religious Jew, a rabbi from Jerusalem, a simple and a conservative man. And he has an inability to accept the lies of the government. And that's what I mean when I say gaslit. He describes having simply been lied to, misled by the prime minister, who said to his face, only military pressure will get the hostages out, only to see his own son shot in the head and killed because of that same military pressure. And he's become the voice of that kind of suffering in Israel. And I think that the chances are quite good that over the next few weeks, now that this hostage trauma is over as an active political issue, I think that Israeli society is going to begin to be able to assimilate what has happened, to deal with what has happened. And we don't know yet in what direction the trauma will go, but certainly Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to have to contend with accusations he really has been able to ignore until now. I want to point out specifically, Rabbi Danino pointed out that at least 42 hostages were killed in captivity who could have been saved. He's been told this by Israeli military leaders, and he repeats it constantly. And I think more and more of that will come out now.
I'm on the line to Jerusalem with journalist Noga Tarnopolsky on a day that Israeli officials have announced the return of the remains of the last hostage taken by Hamas in Gaza. Noga, on paper, this is the moment when phase 2 of the Trump-brokered peace plan for Gaza can begin. What is the next step?
The next steps are extremely complicated for both sides. Gaza will have to be demilitarized according to the terms of Trump's ceasefire, and Hamas has to lay down its arms. Hamas is an institution, a terror group that came into existence to be an armed terror group, an Islamist terror army. And so for Hamas to lay down its arms is a kind of a form of suicide, of changing its raison d'etre. And that's going to be very complicated. Sometimes when I listen to Israeli officials, like today the Minister of Transport, I get the feeling that Israelis are counting on Hamas not laying down its arms so that Israel won't have to do its part. On the Israeli side, Israel will have to simply leave Gaza, withdraw its forces to the perimeter of the enclave. And again, this is something that Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised Israelis would never happen. He has said throughout this war, we will never leave. The security of Gaza will always be on us. And you're already hearing now, you're not hearing Israeli ministers talk about finally being able to bring the soldiers home. Instead, what I heard the Minister of Transport, who I just mentioned, say today is, let's see if any international body comes in to force Hamas to lay down its arms, because if not, the Israeli army is going to do it. And she repeated this several times, and that really does reflect a government line, which basically is, we're going to be nice to Trump. We're going to hold our skepticism at bay and give this a chance for a few weeks. But basically, we're going to remain in charge. And if those two things happen, if Hamas does not lay down its arms, and if Israel then does not redeploy, there will be no phase 2 and certainly no reconstruction of Gaza or no betterment of the circumstances for Gazans.
So this is a really critical point, the laying down of arms. Hamas said today, with the news of Ran Gavili's remains, that the return of all hostages shows that the group is committed to the 20-point peace plan. What is the official reaction from Hamas about laying down their arms?
Well, what you just quoted has been Hamas's official reaction. And as you say, it did not include the words laying down of arms. It did not include the words disarmament. There can be some leverage on Hamas, certainly put on by the Qataris if they choose to act that way. But Hamas, I don't think, views the prospect of laying down its arms as something realistic that it's going to do. Hamas sees phase 2 as a moment when it will be able to regroup. It will be able to retake control of the vast industry of smuggling into Gaza that kept it alive for much of the last 17 years, and will allow it to hold on to the administration of the enclave. That's what Hamas has basically been doing for the last 3 months since the ceasefire went into effect. We have seen Hamas reorganizing itself to govern Gaza on many, many levels.
That's a good point. You mentioned the Rafah border crossing earlier, because while all this is happening, Israel has said it will reopen that border crossing between Gaza and Egypt in the southern part of the territory. What is the significance of this announcement, if any, Noga?
That's another great question. Israel so far has announced that it is going to open the Rafah border crossing 4 times, including the announcement today. And in each of the previous 3 times, it was just an announcement followed up by nothing. This is another one of Netanyahu's promises. I'm not entirely clear on why this has become a hill to die on for Prime Minister Netanyahu, but one of the things he's promised is that Israel will never relinquish control of Rafah. I think it does have to do, to a certain extent, with the smuggling industry, but Rafah, of course, was far from the only place that smuggling took place into Gaza. Rafah, just to be clear, is the border area between Egypt and Gaza.
Right.
So in theory, Israel should have nothing to do with it. But what Netanyahu said today is very difficult to understand. The Prime Minister's office put out a statement saying that Israel will open Rafah per the terms of the ceasefire agreement only once the body of the last hostage is back, and then a series of other conditions. That only people will cross, only in the not goods, only in the direction of Gaza outwards, not inwards. All these conditions that contravene the terms of the Trump ceasefire plan, and that would make the opening of Rafah basically insignificant. I've also heard talk here that Israel may be planning to open like a mirror border, another border right next to the Rafah border crossing, so that even if Rafah is announced as something open, Israel will be able to block people from crossing there or block goods and force them to go through its alternate border crossing. All kinds of things seem to be in the air, but none of them are really reflect what the terms of the ceasefire indicate, which is a free border crossing run by Palestinians and Egypt. And I think that whether or not this happens is going to depend really solely on one man, and that one man is Donald Trump.
So clearly a lot of uncertainty around this transition, this supposed pivot to phase 2. What is the significance of this moment for Netanyahu?
Significance for Netanyahu is really major. And we return now to the question of why did he want to put this off? One of the first things that is going to emerge now in Israel are demands that he declare an end to the war. Because, while the United States has declared this war over, Israel has not. And that has many ramifications, including for elections that are supposed to take place in Israel later this year by October, according to the law. But as long as Netanyahu remains a prime minister operating in emergency circumstances, for example, those elections could legally be postponed. There are many other ramifications. We're already seeing some pressure grow. I don't think that the Trump administration cares much about these niceties, about whether Israel defines the war as over or not. But inside Israel, and in terms of Netanyahu's ability to operate, I do think there will be an impact. The other thing are just who he is, his persona in the Israeli public space. He promised that Israel would not end this war before Hamas was eradicated. Those are his words. And that clearly has not happened. He's promised, as we've been talking about, that the Palestinian Authority would not step foot in Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu became Mr. No during this war. No Turkey, no Palestinians, no Hamas, no Qatar, no other Arab nations. And so Since he never proposed a solution and just said no, the Americans have basically decided to move ahead without him, conceptually without him. And so what we're going to see now is growing political pressure on Netanyahu to declare a date for elections and to declare an end to the war, to allow Israel to move on. And also we have to see how he handles a very complex situation. If Donald Trump loses interest and the White House moves on, he'll have some breathing space. But Netanyahu can no longer say no to the White House. He's not in a position to deny the White House what it wants.
And so it goes. Journalist Noga Tarnopolsky speaking with us from Jerusalem. Thank you, as always, Noga.
A pleasure to speak with you, as always.
During World War II, Japanese Americans were declared by the U.S. government to be enemy aliens. This was after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. Most Japanese Americans were sent to internment camps, but some went on to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. Today, 7 Japanese American soldiers are being posthumously promoted as officers. The 7 cadets initially worked in Hawaii with a battalion known as the Varsity Victory Volunteers. The unit performed unpleasant tasks like digging ditches and breaking rocks. But in 1943, American leaders created a segregated Japanese American regiment. Those soldiers went on to become some of the most decorated in U.S. military history. The 7 men honored today died fighting in Europe in 1944. You're listening to The World. This is The World. I'm Marco Werman. It is officially Super Bowl season. Football is not a particularly international sport, but you know what is? Football. When the difference between the two sports gets lost in translation, the results can be surprising. At least they were for Paul Francisco of Honduras, as he explained during GBH's live story event, Stories from the Stage. His story begins on the warm day he left Honduras, thinking he was going on vacation.
I'm 17 years old, and I'm getting on an airplane for the first time. I'm leaving my native Honduras to fly to Boston on November 28, 1986. I arrived to Boston that evening to 27-degree weather. Welcome to the USA. I'm here with my mother for a 2-week vacation. I am thrilled. I am so excited to get to know the big, bright lights of the city. So we arrived to Logan Airport. We are driving through downtown Boston. I am in awe of all the beautiful building architecture. And for the next 2 weeks, I enjoyed myself. 2 weeks are up. I am excited. I'm coming back home. I am packing my bags. I'm putting the trinkets away of all the T-shirts that I bought at Faneuil Hall. And here comes my grandmother and my mom into the room that I was sharing with my 2 little cousins. My grandmother, the matriarch of the family, is doing all the talking. And she says, with a very somber face, "Son, your mom and I decided that you're going to stay." And my mom had this very sad look on her face. I said, "Mom, you don't want me? I'm the oldest of 5. I felt like my life was back in Honduras." And she said, "No, I want you. I want you to be successful. I want you to stay." So I did. For the next 6 months, I endeavored to learn English. I endeavored to get used to the food. I was used to my arroz con frijoles. I was used to my salsa. And I endeavored to find my identity, to find my voice. In Honduras, I was safe. I felt empowered. I had a sense of identity. Here, I was confused. The twist of faith came when I decided I was going to go back to school because I wanted to learn English and I wanted to go to a 4-year university. I was fortunate enough to find Cathedral High School in the South End. One day I happened to be walking down the hall and someone yells at me, "Hey, you look pretty tall. You play football?" I said, "Yeah, I play football." That decision changed the trajectory of my life. The next day, I showed up to what I thought was football. Right? Those were the days of Pele and Maradona and all the stars that I grew up idolizing. But that wasn't it. It was American football. And the coach approached me and said, "Son, if you want to learn, I'll teach you." I decided to learn. And I did. In fact, I learned so well that I was the only student athlete my senior year from that team that made it to a Division I football program. I ended up going to Boston University, majoring in political science. I thought I wanted to save the world. I thought I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. At the beginning of my senior year, my coach approached me and said, "Hey, I don't know if you noticed, but there have been some NFL scouts here looking at you. And you have an opportunity to make it to the league." Me? I didn't even know what football was 6 years ago. I was projected as a 7th round draft pick that year. It wasn't to be. I didn't get drafted. Okay, I could fold it and go on with my life, or I can give it a try and sign as a free agent somewhere. I did, and I ended up going to Miami. After some time, I came back here to New England and ended up in Cleveland. That team actually moved to Baltimore, and I became a Baltimore Raven. It just so happened that I had an injury, and I had to make a decision. Do I get a very extensive surgery, neck and vertebrae fusing, or do I call it a day? Called it a day, packed all my belongings, driving from Baltimore back to Boston. First 4 hours of that trip, I was bawling, crying like a little baby. Something happened. I don't know if it was the music I was listening, maybe it was Mega 97.7, the Spanish station, when I hit New York. But when I hit that George Washington Bridge, something changed. A calm came over me. And I knew that it was time to move on to the next thing. I didn't know what that was. 3 months later, I'm sitting at a Thanksgiving game. A former teammate of mine says to me, "Have you ever thought about working in insurance?" I said, "No." He said, "Why don't you come by? We have this role. I think you'd be really good at it." I said, "Sure." 3 days later, I was sitting in front of 5 guys who were all looking at me, about to interview me, and I am prepared. First time having a resume, first time interviewing, I'm ready. All they wanted to know was about football. Not one question about the role itself. I left the interview thinking, I bummed it. I get a call saying, "You got the job." I said, "Wonderful." I started working at an insurance company as an insurance adjuster. I was part of a 72-member class that would get trained for 7 weeks at the home office. In that class, I was the only person that looked like me. And that greatly bothered me. And it bothered me because I had come from a world where diversity was just abundant. Diversity of backgrounds, skill sets, experiences, religions, political affiliations, everything. And so when I got on that campus and I saw that I was the only one, I asked why. And the answer I got was, there aren't any people that look like you that want to come and work in insurance. And they say, we can't find them. And I said, where are you looking? So I raised my hand and I said, I'll help you. Ever since that day, I decided to dedicate my life and career to ensuring that no one ever says, we can't find people like you. The great philosopher / hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, once said, you'll miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And I must say, throughout my life and career, I've taken a lot of shots. Some I've missed, and some I made. Thank you.
Paul Francisco there, speaking at GBH's live event, Stories from the Stage. The World is produced by GBH and PRX, broadcasting weekdays from the Nan and Bill Harris studio in Boston and from the Department of Communication at UC San Diego. I'm Marco Werman. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.
The World is supported by the Carnegie Corporation of New York, working to reduce political polarization through philanthropic support for education, democracy, and peace. More information at carnegie.org. By the Lumina Foundation, committed to a fair, universal system for learning beyond high school that offers every American the chance for a better life. LuminaFoundation.org. By the PRX Ambassador Council, whose members include Judy Piggott, the Gruber Family Foundation, the Schmidt Family Foundation, and Gavin Salmonese, LLC. The World's theme music is composed by Ned Porter. The World is a co-production of GBH Boston and PRX.